Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of the textual study of the Quran. We have been starting, and in fact, we are continuing with our that part of Surah Al-Imran in which the Battle of Uhud was being discussed, and how initially Muslims were successful, but later on they actually suffered defeat because of the misplanning shown by a few people who were designated at their battle posts, but they left these battle posts against the directive of the Prophet, and they started to proceed to loot the spoils of war. And it was this greed actually which cost the rest of the army the whole battle. So in between this, we have been discussing the reason of this defeat. The Quran has also made it evident that there are certain things which were present amongst Muslims, in fact certain elements, especially the hypocrites and weak Muslims, and the shortcomings that they had. At this instance they came onto the surface and they had to be dealt with so that Muslims and their whole ranks could be cleansed from such people. So we start off where we left previously. We had done until verse 148. We have finished studying and literally and idiomatically translating and also explaining until verse 148. So we will begin today with verse 149. So the words are, Ya ayyuhal lazina amanu in tuti'ul lazina kafaru yaruddukum ala a'qabikum fatanqalibu khasirin balillahu mawlakum wa huwa khayrun nasirin sanulqi fi qulubil lazina kafaru ar-ru'ba bima ashraku billahi ma lam yunazzil bihi sultana wa ma'wahumun nar wa bi'sa maswa az-zalimin. Believers, if you obey these disbelievers, they shall surely revert you back and you will end up as losers. Now, of course, this is a question that might arise in the minds of people, that how was it possible for these disbelievers to have such a dominant influence that the believers might succumb to their suggestions. So basically the Quran is commenting on the propaganda which was spread amongst the Muslims after they suffered the losses in the Battle of Uhud, and from which the leaders of the disbelievers of Mecca tried to convince people that if Prophet Muhammad was really a true prophet, he was sent by God, he would never have suffered this loss. So this was the propaganda that they were inculcating, and of course it was a very weighty and a very convincing one, because Muslims always thought that the help of God would come to them, and therefore when they saw that defeat was staring in their eye, so it was the time for these people to spread this propaganda. And then they would tell people that this conflict was primarily based on resources and strategy once Muslims won, and this time they had lost. So the point that they were trying to make here is that Muslims think that it was divine help, or it has been divine help, which came to their aid in the Battle of Badr, and therefore they won at that time, and they were very clearly outnumbered. The odds were against them and they still won. But now they say that in this battle it clearly seems that it was a question of a better strategy which the Quraysh adopted, and hence they won. And had Prophet Muhammad been really someone sent by God, he would not have suffered this defeat. So that is the context in which it is being said that if you obey these disbelievers, they shall surely revert you back and you will end up as losers. So don't succumb to their propaganda, don't listen to them, because they are using this situation to their own advantage. It is not these people but God who is your helper, and his help is the best. You will see that we shall now strike your awe in the hearts of these disbelievers, because they associated things with God for whom he has revealed no sanction. The fire shall be their abode, and what an evil abode it is for those who are unjust to their souls. So clearly you can see, as far as the Quran is concerned, it is consoling the Muslims. It is telling them that although they have suffered this defeat, but they should not be in any way dejected and disappointed and not lose hope, because ultimate victory is going to be theirs, because وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ نَاصِرِينَ, God is their best helper. He is going to come to their help. At this particular instance, if they suffered defeat, it was for a certain reason, and that reason was to bring to the fore the shortcomings of the Muslims and expose the hypocrites also, so that Muslims are cleansed of their existence, of their, as a body politic that they have found in them, they get to know who they are, and at the same time, the weaker sections of the Muslims, they also get to know that these are the shortcomings that they must overcome. So, sanulqi fi qulubil lazina kafaru ar-ru'b, and then this part of the propaganda again, that of course, when Muslims or the masses of the Muslims were seeming to succumb to this propaganda, the Almighty assured them that He will strike your awe in the hearts of these disbelievers because they associated things with God for whom He has revealed no sanction. So the real folly or the real offense that they have been committing, and this is something that has been continuing, is deliberate association of other pairs with God. And they are very well convinced that there is no one who can rival God, there is no other deity with God, but they still do that. So the Quran says, and the Almighty in fact stresses this fact, that the hearts of the disbelievers, they'll be struck by awe, they'll be absolutely in shambles, but for this they have to wait for the right time, and then not only will they be routed in this world, the Quran says, وَمَأْوَاهُمُ النَّارِ, their fate, their ultimate fate is going to be the fire of hell. وَبِئْسَ مَثْوَى الظَّالِمِينَ, and what evil and abhor it is for those who are unjust to their souls. Of course, the word zalimin refers to the fact, zalimun li nafsihi, people who deny the right of their souls, they are called the biggest oppressors, because the right of the soul is to believe in one God. So when they associate partners, when they bring other deities at par with God, or even in some deities which might be working as His associates, then this is something in which they are denying the basic right of their soul, and hence the word oppressor or zalimin, it is very, very justified. And we also know that from other instances that the Quran has called polytheism or shirk as zulmun azim, the greatest oppression, the greatest injustice, because it has absolutely no justification. وَلَقَدْ صَدَقَكُمُ اللَّهُ وَعْدَهُ إِسْتَحُسُّونَهُمْ بِإِذْنِهِ حَتَّى إِذَا فَشِلْتُمْ وَتَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ وَعَصَيْتُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا أَرَاكُمْ مَا تُحِبُّونَ مِنْكُمْ مَنْ يُرِيدُ الدُّنْيَا وَمِنْكُمْ مَنْ يُرِيدُ الْآخِرَةَ ثُمَّ صَرَفَكُمْ عَنْهُمْ لِيَبْتَلِيَكُمْ وَلَقَدْ عَفَا عَنْكُمْ وَاللَّهُ ذُو فَضْلٍ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. God fulfilled His promise of help made with you when by His permission you were putting them to the sword, until when you yourselves showed weakness and differed with each other in following the directive and disobeyed the messenger after God had made you see what you desired. This is a reality, that some among you were seekers of this world and some of the next. Consequently, after this victory, God again turned you away from them to test you, so that those who are after the pleasures of this world become distinct. And the truth is that He still forgave you, and God is very gracious to the believers. Again, part of this detailed comment that is continuing regarding the Battle of Uhud and the losses which are suffered. If you can see from the text, it says, وَلَقَدْ صَدَّقَكُمُ اللَّهُ وَعْدَهُ إِسْتَحُسُّونَهُم بِإِذْنِهِ. So the word بِإِذْنِهِ actually means from the permission of God. The purpose is to show that the extraordinary consequence of the battle in the first phase was not the result of any planning or strategy of the Muslims. It was because of God's power and intention. So basically, we know that in the first part of the battle, Muslims had routed the disbelievers, but we know from history also, and all authorities, they know that the initial onslaught that was launched by the Muslims was so successful that they prevailed upon their enemy. But one group of the combatants, which was deputed at a mountain pass, and which had been directed by Prophet Muhammad that they must not leave, they were told that they must not leave this place come what may. But initially, when they saw their success, they thought it was now time to grab a share in the war booty, and then they deserted their place. And very few from this group actually remained stationed on those posts. A battalion of the army took advantage of this situation, and with a concerted effort attacked the Muslims from the rear. So successful was this attack that they lost their wits, and they were totally in disarray, and they suffered this defeat. So, as far as this battle is concerned, we know that initially they were successful, as God says that, you were actually putting them to the sword with God's leave and by His permission, until when you yourselves became weak. Hatta iza fashiltum wa tanaza'tum fil amr, and you differed with one another. The difference, of course, being that there were differences arisen in the camp, that the people who were stationed and at that mountain pass, they had been told not to leave their place, but when they thought that they had won the battle and they should leave their battle place, there were others who were stopping them, but they did not listen. So this is what is being referred to here, وَتَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. You were showing differences one with another, and then it says, وَعَصَيْتُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا أَرَاكُمْ مَا تُحِبُّونَ. وَعَصَيْتُمْ means you were also disobeying. The Prophet, you remember, had told them to stay put at their place, but they left that place, and as a result, the Quran says, مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا أَرَاكُمْ مَا تُحِبُّونَ. After God had made you see what you desired, which means the victory that you had desired, which God wanted them to earn, and they themselves saw, then when they saw that this initial victory had come to them, they actually, instead of holding their ground, instead of staying put where they were told, they left their places and they deserted. And then the Quran has made this comment, minkum man yuridu dunya wa minkum man yuridu al-akhirah, that this mistake was primarily committed by those people who wanted this war booty. They were after the pleasures of this world. Minkum man yuridu dunya wa minkum man yuridu al-akhirah summa sarafakum anhum liyabtaliyakum wa laqad afa ankum. So after this victory, God again turned you away from them to test you. Once again, God gave them this, He forgave them, and instead of leaving them at the mercy of the enemy, He gave them the opportunity to return to their homes after merely making them pass through a trial. So yes, they did suffer defeat, but then it was not in such a manner that they were totally routed. They were able to still make their way back to their homes. وَلَقَدْ عَفَا عَنْكُمْ, and God also forgave them. And وَاللَّهُ ذُو فَضْلٍ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and God is very gracious. So as you can see, the law of the Almighty is unrelenting. It is unbiased. It goes, for both the believers and disbelievers. If believers show slackness, if they don't hold on to the principles that they have been told to adhere to, then they will also face the consequences and face the law of God. Such is the unrelenting and unbiased nature of God's law. إِذْ تُصْعِدُونَ وَلَا تَلْوُونَ عَلَىٰ أَحَدٍ وَالرَّسُولُ يَدْعُوكُمْ فِي أُخْرَاكُمْ فَأَصَابَكُمْ غَمًّا بِغَمٍّ لِكَيْ لَا تَحْزَنُوا عَلَىٰ مَا فَاتَكُمْ وَلَا مَا أَصَابَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ خَبِيرٌ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ. Remember when you were fleeing and were not even turning to look behind, and the messenger of God was calling you from behind you in one of your own groups, which was standing alongside him. So God inflicted you with one sorrow after another, so that after passing through this trial, you do not grieve in future on what you lose and on any calamity which may befall you, and remember that God knows whatever you do. So if you see the word tus'idun, basically it means to advance towards an incline. You're going towards an incline, and from here actually it means that the expression means that you run forward in a direction and you are not in a position to even look back. So it's like just giving that dash. And if you look at the word ghammam bi ghammil likayla, basically it tells you that they return with one sorrow after another. And it seems that this second sorrow was the one that we famously know from history. And of course, this refers to the sorrow which the Muslims faced during this time from the rumor spread by the disbelievers about the Prophet's passing away or his martyrdom. So the rumor is mentioned in history and biography books, and this verse of the Quran is also indicative of it. So Muslims were running amok in such a manner that they were not even aware of what was happening around them. So it was like defeat staring them in their eye, and the Prophet was actually calling them that come back. So you see, if you look at the words, يَدْعُوكُمْ فِي أُخْرَاكُمْ, the Prophet was standing back and he was signaling them to return, don't run away. But they were so flabbergasted that they did not even know that it was the Prophet who was calling them, and they ran. And of course, this shows the consequence, and it is evident that this sorrow must relate to the person of Prophet Muhammad if you look at فَأَصَابَكُمْ. And so that if we look at these precise words, we can clearly see that فَأَصَابَكُمْ is something which must relate to the person of the Prophet. so that they are warned on their lack of giving due importance to him. And this, of course, was the news that came to them, that perhaps they were facing the tremendous news of the Prophet leaving them. So it was this double sorrow that they were faced with, and that is what the Quran says, Wallahu khabirum bima ta'malun, that that they should remember that God knows whatever you do. So clearly you can see how the Battle of Uhud is discussed in such detail, so that Muslims are not in any position, or they are not left with any doubt that if there was any consternation, if there was any defeat that stared them in the eye, it was because of their own wrong attitude that they had adopted by not obeying the Prophet, specifically when he had said that they should not leave their posts. ثم أنزل عليكم من بعد الغم أمنة نعاسا يغشى طائفة منكم وطائفة قد أهمتهم أنفسهم يظنون بالله غير الحق ظن الجاهلية يقولون هل لنا من الأمر من شيء قل إن الأمر كله لله يخفون في أنفسهم ما لا يبدون لك يقولون لو كان لنا من الأمر شيء ما قتلنا هاهنا. Then after this sorrow, God once again let peace descend upon you in the form of a sleep which was overtaking some of you, and there were some who were fearing for their lives. They were engaging in totally false thoughts of the age of Jahiliyyah about God. They were saying, do we also have any say in these matters? Tell them, all matters are in the hands of God. They are concealing in their hearts what they do not reveal to you. They say, if we had any say in this matter, we would not have been slain like this. Now, once again, you see, it seems that the comment here is very clear that Muslims, of course, they fought this battle, and we also know from history that the Prophet actually conferred with his soldiers and his senior officers that what should they do regarding this enemy attack. And a majority or the people who really mattered, they said that, well, we should go out of the city and then intercept the Quraysh, their own army. Whilst the hypocrites and the weak in faith, they said that, well, we should not go out and we should remain inside of the city and launch an attack from there, or at least defend the city. So it is these people who had said that had we remained in the city and not gone out for the attack, we would not have been killed. If you look what has been said, يَقُولُونَ هَلْ لَنَا مِنَ الْأَمْرِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ, that if we had any say in this matter, then we would not have, we already had this opinion that the Prophet should not go out, but he did not listen to us. He went out and he said we didn't have any say because he just overrode what we said. And then they are told, Kul innal amra kullahu lillah, tell them that all this matter or all this decision belongs to God, and you were hiding in your own inner selves, ma la yubduna lak, and they were hiding in their hearts what they did not reveal to you. And what were they hiding? They say that if we had any say in this matter, we would not have been slain like this, which means that had we stayed in the city and not gone out, we would not have been slain like this. And God is actually telling them that if death is going to come, is destined for you, then wherever you are, it is going to come to you. But before that, before this comment is made, actually, we can also clearly see that the Quran has said that after this sorrow, God once again let peace descend upon you in the form of sleep. That yes, after this lesson had been learned, Muslim army did get a rest for some time. But then again, there were few of them who were still thinking of what was happening. And as the Quran says, يَظُنُّونَ بِاللَّهِ غَيْرَ الْحَقِّ ظَنَّ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ, they were actually thinking and engaging in totally false thoughts of the age of Jahiliyyah. And these false thoughts were that had the Prophet listened to them, he would not have gone out of the city, he would have stayed in, and the defense was strong, and this would not have happened. But then the Quran has very emphatically said, قُلْ لَوْ كُنْتُمْ فِي بُيُوتِكُمْ لَبَرَزَ الَّذِينَ كُتِبَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْقَتْلُ إِلَى مَضَاجِعِهِمْ وَلِيَبْتَلِيَ اللَّهُ مَا فِي صُدُورِكُمْ وَلِيُمَحِّصَ مَا فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ بِذَاتِ الصُّدُورِ. Which means, say, had you stayed back in your homes, those of you who were destined to be killed would have gone to the places of death nevertheless. So, Once again, try to understand the fact that all this happened because God wanted to make you distinct from one another, and because He may test what is concealed in your chests, and because He may cleanse the evil of your hearts. And in reality, God knows what is in the hearts. So clearly, these thoughts that came to their mind, that had the Prophet listened to them, they would not have suffered this disbelief, this death or this carnage. They are being told that, well, if death was destined for them in this way, then staying in the city would not have helped, and they would have gone right to their places where death was destined to them, because death is something which was bound to come. The thing is, it was their test that they should have fought, they should not have left their places, and that is something that the Quran has said, that through this battle, the Almighty has made distinct the hypocrites among them. He has made distinct the weak among them, so that they now know, and Muslims now know, that they have these elements, and these are elements who are in their own ranks. They are not their well-wishers. They have their own agenda. They have their own ties and friendship with the disbelievers, and they have to be aware of them. So remember, these hypocrites, they were in large numbers, and a very major part of these hypocrites actually belong to the people of the book. So they had infiltrated amongst Muslim ranks, and they wanted their own concern and their own objective to be fulfilled. And of course, this was something which is absolutely against what Muslims wanted to do. So it was they who also influenced the weaker Muslims. So remember, they had a very hefty influence on others also. So before we go on to the next part or the remaining verses, if you have any questions regarding what we have just studied, please raise them.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem, for such a wonderful session. And assalamu alaikum to everyone. Amar Rasool, I see that you have your hand raised. Please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum. Dr. Sir, first of all, my question is that the assassination of Hazrat Hamza, did it happen before the Muslims had made the mistake of leaving their posts on the mountain of Uhud, or did it happen afterwards?
Well, that you need to check in history books. I'm not particularly sure, but I do think that it was something that happened later on when Muslims initially they had won the battle, we know that. And I think, if I remember correctly, this incident took place after the Muslims had left their battle posts, the weaker Muslims and the hypocrites. It was then that they were attacked from the rear once again, and then this happened. But please do double check.
Okay. And so very quickly, I also wanted to ask, there was this moment where I thought I heard you say that some verse is also connected or is talking about the death of the Prophet. Did you say
Yes.
that, or did I miss?
No, that is what we know from history, that something related to the person of the Prophet. So if you look at the Quranic verse which says, فَأَصَابَكُمْ غَمًّا بِغَمِّ اللَّيْلَ, it does seem that something had happened with the person of the Prophet. The Arabic language, the way it is constructed here, if you see, it says, إِسْتُسْعِدُونَ وَلَا تَلْوُونَ عَلَىٰ أَحَدٍ وَالرَّسُولُ يَدْعُوكُمْ فِي أُخْرَاكُمْ, which means that you were fleeing, you were running away, and you were not even turning your back. And the messenger of God was calling you from behind. وَالرَّسُولُ يَدْعُوكُمْ فِي أُخْرَاكُمْ. And then it says, فَأَصَابَكُمْ غَمًّا بِغَمٍّ. As a result, because of this fate, God inflicted further sorrow on you. So although the Quran does not mention this sorrow, but clearly because of the fa here, it shows that whatever happened was something that related to the person of the Prophet, because they are being told that he was calling you from behind, but you were fleeing away from that place. You were running so fast and you were not even listening to him. So something happened to him. But this is something which the Quran has not clearly described. But we know from established history and from historical sources that basically...
Could it be referring to
what?
Sorry. So could it be referring to the personal injury that the Prophet, because, there are sort of like, people say that he was personally injured, his teeth were injured, or his... So
I think that the nature of this, the strength on the extent of the emphasis which is found in this verse shows that it should have been something more worse, something even more grave. I mean, because we also know from history that this is a rumor that was spread, and you can imagine Muslims, because the Quran is also commented on their attitude. They thought that the Prophet had come and he would stay forever. If you remember the last verses, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ أَفَإِن مَاتَ أَوْ قُتِلَ. They thought that if the Prophet is going to suffer an injury or he's going to be killed, I mean, they have been told that did not earlier prophets came and they also passed away, so no one is going to live eternally. So you see, this was this feeling that was already found in them, that perhaps the Prophet is going to stay with them for a very long time. So when they saw and when they heard this really, I mean, totally routed them. So the word ghammam bi ghammil likaila, actually, I mean, if you really look deep into this construction, that one sorrow after the other. So the first sorrow was the defeat that stared in their eye and they left their posts, and the second sorrow was this news. Of course, this was a false news, but then it was sufficient to create this huge consternation amongst the Muslim ranks.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Dr. Saleem, I have a question. So there is a battle, I believe, where God sent angels to help him. Which one was that?
So that was the Battle of Badr.
Not this one?
The Battle of Badr, and the Prophet, yes, the Battle of Badr was there. And I mean, the Quran has explicitly mentioned that the Almighty had sent 3,000 angels to help them. وَلَقَدْ نَصَرَكُمُ اللَّهُ بِبَدْرٍ وَأَنْتُمْ أَذِلَّةٌ. These are the words of the Quran. And I'm sure there must have been other battles also in which these angels were sent, because of course divine help, it is through, I mean, divine help descends in this way. But not at every instance has the Quran clarified that angels fought alongside them. But clearly in the Battle of Badr, they have been mentioned.
But do we know why then in this battle Muslims suffered such a bad defeat? Was it, I mean, the assumption is that Allah was...
We've just seen how we just seen that the Prophet told them that they must not leave their battle posts, because that was a very strategic place. If they had left their battle posts, I mean, it could have given a very good chance for the routed army to regroup and then attack from behind. So that was what the Prophet did not want to happen, and he instructed them. But when you go against the directive of the Prophet and you have the greed of the war booty in your mind, then the Almighty, of course, is going. I just said that His law is unrelenting, is unbiased. If you show this greed for war booty, that was the primary thing which the Quran says, that it was for this war booty that they left their posts. They thought that they had won the battle, and when they saw that other people were looting the war spoils, they thought that they should also have a share, without realizing that they were ordered not to leave their place. So that is why the Almighty made them suffer this defeat, to make them show that it is not for these war booties that wars are fought. And at the same time, if you show disobedience to a prophet of God who has directed you explicitly to stay at one place, then he's not going to send his miracle or his own army to save you, because once you have done something wrong, then I mean, you have to atone for that. And one of the things that has to happen and does happen in the case of God is that He lets that punishment or the reversal take place, so that people learn a lesson.
Okay. So basically,
is precisely.
this like, it is almost like when you mentioned that God takes His, when I think in the time of Musa and Isa and all the other prophets, not Isa, but Ibrahim, there was always natural calamity. Is this the calamity we refer to when we talk about how...
No. So that's a different. I mean, those calamities are meant for the disbelievers. They are not meant for believers. They are not meant for such. So this is a reversal which the believers basically suffered, although it was because of the wrong attitude adopted by their own section, but it affected the whole Muslim army. So this was primarily to make them realize that they have such people in their ranks, to expose those people, and of course, if any one of them had any semblance of being reformed and to get himself changed, then he is given that opportunity. So this is basically, these are small trials and tests which the Almighty makes the believers pass through, so that they learn from their mistakes and then they become strong to face the enemy.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Saleem. Ruhi Rasool, please unmute your mic and ask your question. Ruhi? Can you hear me?
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Yeah.
Walaikum assalam.
Sir, this part where the fighters were given a sort of sleep during the war, in the mid
Yes.
of the war,
Yes.
when half of them had lost and and the war
Right.
was still going on. Isn't such an incident is mentioned in the war of Badr as well,
Where exactly?
when
Which
Hazur
surah?
Pak Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was praying for success.
I mean, you have to cite a Quranic verse for that. I don't remember any such Quranic verse.
Sir, what I remember about the Jang-e Badr is this, that the fighters were given a sort of sleep or
I mean, this is for the Battle of Uhud, not for Badr. So in the Battle of Uhud, when they had suffered this reversal, and I mean, because this is a situation in which once an army suffers defeat, it is very difficult for people to recoup and even sleep. So God said that even after this mistake of theirs, He was in a position, He forgave them, and a very large part of the army was able to sleep. Although others were still in consternation and they were in a state of anxiety, but God showed His mercy, because to sleep in a battlefield, if you know the psyche of war, is an extremely difficult thing. When the wars are happening, soldiers, they stay awake for days, because you see the danger for the enemy attack is always there, and they take turns to guard themselves. But because of being in small in number, this was not always possible. So when the night time came, and usually it was the custom amongst Arabs that the battles were not fought at night, except if there was this guerrilla warfare that also there used to happen sometimes, but mostly wars would happen during the day. So but there was always this chance that some hanky-panky would be at stake, and the opposing army might even attack at night. So they had to remain alert most of the time. And for this, of course, they would be dividing their duties. But as I said, being short in numbers was not very easy. So it was like God's blessing that even at this time, when people are full of anxiety, worry, and tension, God was merciful, and a part of their army was able to sleep.
Thank you so much for that. Dr. Saleem, Abdul Rahman, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem.
Walaikum assalam.
Sir, you just mentioned about that event of people, were there Sahaba or were they hypocrites? I mean, that's one part of my question. I mean, was this a deliberate rejection of Prophet command, or was this a situational miscalculation?
So you can clearly see that they were not the Sahaba at all. These were the weak Muslims and some of the hypocrites. You see, the Quran, if you look at the Quran from the beginning to the end, the hypocrites are dealt with by the Quran initially in a very affectionate way, because you see, hypocrisy is not always, it does not always have that mean intent. At times, weakness in faith borders with the hypocrisy, very, very close to each other. There is a very thin line between them. So the Almighty has given plenty of chances to hypocrites that if any one of them, they still have a semblance of any humanity still left in them, then such incidents could jolt them. I have given you this example, I think, before as well, that when the hypocrites of Medina, they started to scandalize the lives of the wives of the Prophet. So what did the Prophet, what did God do? He did not tighten the hypocrites. He actually gave stringent directives to the wives of the Prophet and said that you stick to your homes, don't go out, because they are hypocrites who are going to scandalize you and they are going to play all sorts of mischief. So even here you can see that instead of exposing the hypocrites, the Almighty did not do so. He actually tightened the screws, I would say, gave them stricter directives to the Muslims and not to the hypocrites, because you see, there was always a chance that they were people who were weak in faith, were not exactly hypocrites, but they were bordering on hypocrisy, so that if they are somehow jolted out of their hypocrisy and weakness, they can be done so. So throughout this struggle, a very large part of these hypocrites, they had infiltrated. And if you look at Surah Tawbah, which is the surah in which the punishment is pronounced, the hypocrites were never actually exposed even after the death of the Prophet. They were never exposed. So the idolaters were exposed because they they expressly said that we believe in more than one God, and they were known who they were. The people of the book were known, but hypocrites were the ones that even after the death of the Prophet, they remained undercover, and the punishment for them never came. Some of them, yes, they were punished, but a majority of them, they still remain. And if you look at some of the events of history, you'll see that a lot of problematic things that happened after the Prophet's demise were because of these conspiracies and connivances of the hypocrites. If you look at the propaganda in which a lot of weak ahadith were spread from a very large part of the section of people, you'll find that there were these hypocrites at the back of them. If you see some of the other historical details, I'm not going to go into details because that's another topic. What I'm just trying to say is that they have a very, very problematic sort of and a checkered history as well. And their presence is there in the whole of the Quran, but never did a moment arrive in which they were actually taken to task. And they remained underneath the surface. And a lot of events that took place after the Prophet's demise, which were very gory events, carnage took place. They had their role pretty much defined, and that's how things happened actually.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Dr. Muhammad Asif, please unmute your mic and ask your question. Dr. Asif, are you there?
In these verses, minkum man yuridu dunya.
Yes.
And it is said that this refers to those people who left their place
Yes.
despite the command of the
Correct.
Prophet not to leave the place, and then they left the place.
Correct.
And it appears that it was a matter of interpretation on their part, and they felt that now this is the time that they can leave their place for some purpose. But the Quran refers to them as man yuridu dunya. This is something very serious, that they want this worldly desires. Despite they didn't want that. I think that appears to be a matter of interpretation.
You see, had it been a matter of interpretation, the Quran would not have spoken these words. So the Quran knew them from their hearts, from their insides. So it was not anything related to the fact that they might have thought that the war had been won and now they can leave their battle posts. So remember, for the Quran and the Prophet had said, "Come what may, you must not leave your posts, even if you win the battle." The Prophet was absolutely clear that you have to remain on guard all the time. So if you look at the verses closely, you say, وَعَصَيْتُم مِّن بَعْدِ مَا أَرَاكُمْ. So they disobeyed. The asa part, the Quran is clearly stated that they disobeyed what the Prophet told them. The Prophet said that they must not leave. So there's no question of any interpretation here. They were given this explicit directive of not leaving that place. And secondly, if you look at the words minkum man yuridu dunya, this actually gives us information about their inner selves, that their real motive was not any interpretation. Their real motive was that they thought that other people are looting the spoils of war, and if they remain on their posts, they would be deprived of this war booty. So they jumped into it. And that is why the Quran has made these two distinct categories. Minkum man yuridu dunya wa minkum man yuridu al-akhirah. So those among them who were the slaves of this world, they jumped to this opportunity. Others who were not, they tried to stay back, but of course they were very few in number.
Thank you for that, Dr. Saleem. Naeem Afridi, please unmute your mic.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum assalam.
My question is regarding those angels sent down as Prophet Muhammad SAW made a dua. So, two occasions, right? So my question is, did angels participate, or it was just to strengthen the Muslims' hearts and terrorizing the mushrikins?
I think if you look at some of the other surahs of the Quran is very explicitly, it says that they actually participated. They were they became part of the Muslim army, and they were there in the form of, not in the original form, but in the form of human beings, and they were right at the side. And some of the verses tell us that Musawwimin, they had these badges marked as if they have been distinctly set by the Almighty, so that they could be known that this is like a divine force that is being sent to them. So they had these distinct signs and badges hung on their apparel, so it seems. So they did fight, and that is how actually the victory was attained. Otherwise, there was no use seeing them. And they were not merely sent to boost the morale of the army; they were sent to fight alongside the army.
Jazakallah, sir.
Hassan, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Dr. Shehzad, as we know, the last sermon of our Prophet has come down to us in 3 different versions, where he said that
So at the moment, we are taking questions regarding what we have just studied. If you have a general question, we might have time for that near the end of our session.
Okay, I have a general question. I'll probably come back later. Thank you.
Dr. Saleem, I have a question. So the munafiq that we refer to in this battle, is it specifically for these people, or munafiq is anyone who is a hypocrite?
I mean, munafiqun is the Arabic word for hypocrite. They are the same people. But you see, they were in the folds, they were in the ranks of the Muslims all the time. They got exposed in these battles because you see, critical junctures and crisis, it brings forth, it exposes people. And so they got exposed. Otherwise, they were there since the time Muslims had come to Medina, because as we know from Surah Baqarah, that some of them had entered the folds of Islam merely to see who gains victory. They had made this decision that if Muslims gain victory, we'll stay with them, otherwise we'll revert. There were others who were very strong in their attitude, and they had said that, well, we will go into the ranks of Muslims and we will cause this nuisance in them. So they were there with an agenda, and they were there all the time.
Okay, so this is not a specific term for these particular people. Hypocrite is the word hypocrite itself.
Yes,
we
of course.
generally use it. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. You have no more questions, Dr. Saleem?
Okay. So now we go on to verse 155. It says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ تَوَلَّوْا مِنْكُمْ يَوْمَ الْتَقَى الْجَمْعَانِ إِنَّمَا اسْتَزَلَّهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ بِبَعْدِ مَا كَسَبُوا وَلَقَدْ عَفَى اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ حَلِيمٌ. The reason for the mistake of those who had turned their back on the day the two groups faced each other was that because of some of the misdeeds they had committed, Satan had induced them to cowardice. However, God forgave them. Indeed, God is forgiving, most gracious. So this is, of course, something that we already know, that إِنَّ الَّذِينَ تَوَلَّوْا مِنْكُمْ يَوْمَ الْتَقَى الْجَمْعَانِ. It refers to the day of the Battle of Uhud, when certain weak Muslims were influenced by the mischief of Abdullah ibn Ubay and his compatriots. You know that Abdullah ibn Ubay, when the Prophet had decided that he should go and fight the disbelievers outside of Medina, so he left or deserted the Muslim army, and 300 of his compatriots and his associates, we know from history, they also deserted with him, and they had actually raised this propaganda. And so it is being said that the reason for the mistake of those of you who had turned their backs on the day the two groups faced each other was because some of the misdeeds they had committed. Satan had induced them to cowardice. Again, the same thing is being clarified here, that the mistakes or the mistake that they had done was something which Satan was successful in misleading them. Because you see, once someone commits a misdeed or a sin, then he succumbs to the lures of Satan, and from sin emanates another sin, and the onslaughts of Satan are more successful against those whose sins have roots. And for this reason, it is essential that when a person commits a sin, he should not continue to harbor it. In fact, he should cleanse himself of it by asking for God's forgiveness and by sincerely repenting on it. This did not happen. So this cowardice that they had in their own mind, that they wanted that somehow they still are able to win and not be touched and be left unscathed, that is something that's not going to happen. So the Almighty tells us in this verse that whatever happened, it was because some of the misdeeds that they had committed, Satan had induced them to cowardice. That this cowardice was not something that, it was there already. It was because of their own mistakes. So once a person becomes vulnerable, Satan also takes advantage of that. So they were already vulnerable because of the mistake they had done. And now when they saw that this was going to happen, that they're going to be routed, they started to run away as well. So it was as if defeat was staring them in the eye, and they thought that there is absolutely no way out to save their skin except to run away. So the Quran has said it is because of if Satan was successful in misleading them, it was because of their own misdeeds that they became vulnerable, and then Satan was able to influence them. And then the Quran says, بَلَقَدْ أَفَى اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ حَلِيمٌ. However, God forgave them. Indeed, God is forgiving and most merciful, most gracious. Again, the thing that is being meant here, that is being specifically said here, is that even then God showed His graciousness upon them and forgave them. And then we continue. It says, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu la takunu kallazina kafaru wa qalu li ikhwanihim iza dharabu fil ard aw kanu ghuzzan law kanu indana ma matu wa ma qutilu liyaj'al Allahu zalika hasratan fi qulubihim wallahu yuhyi wa yumeet wallahu bima ta'maluna basir. Believers, be not like these people who are disbelievers and who say of their relatives when they travel or go out for a battle and are overcome by death, had they been with us, they would not have died, nor would they have been killed. This is because God will cause them to regret their words. Otherwise, in reality, it is God who ordains life and it is God who ordains death. And whatever you do is in God's sight. So, the actual words, قَالُوا لِإِخْوَانِهِمْ, you can clearly see they are used for in a way that is absolutely evident. And it is something that we have already seen earlier on, that this verse does not call for intrepidity at all. Basically, it tells us that if you are going to follow those people who are disbelievers and who are going to justify their defeat by saying that, well, had they listened to us, they would not have died, they would not have been martyred, tell them that this is not true, because this is something which is God's law. It's not running away from the battlefield that's going to save their skins, or in any way they are going to escape. This is not going to happen. In fact, if this is going to happen, then as the Quran says, لِيَجْعَلَ اللَّهُ ذَلِكَ حَسْرَةً فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ. This is because God will cause them to regret their words. Otherwise, in reality, it is God who ordains life and death. And it is God who ordains death, and whatever you do is in God's sight. So you see, they thought that death was something that was in their control. And had they not adopted a certain strategy, they would not have died. So God is again telling them that this is not something that you have in your control. And if you think that you are going to champion your own or carve out your own fate and champion your own fate, that's not going to happen. Wallahu yuhyi wa yumeet. It is God who gives life and it is God who gives death. You are not responsible for that. Wallahu bima ta'maluna basir. And then وَلَئِن قُتِلْتُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَوْ مُتُّمْ لَمَغْفِرَةٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَحْمَةٌ خَيْرٌ مِّمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ وَلَئِن مُتُّمْ أَوْ قُتِلْتُمْ لَإِلَى اللَّهِ تُحْشَرُونَ. And to add to this, if you are slain for the cause of God or should die, His forgiveness and mercy you secure will indeed be far better than what they are amassing. And this also, that if you should die or be slain, before God shall you all be gathered, come what may. So the Quran is making this point, and emphatically making this point, that remember that you are regretting death. But the fact is that this death is something that is going to make you dearer to God. This is like martyrdom. This is like sacrificing your life for the cause of God. So instead of being happy that you were given this chance to sacrifice your life for the cause of God, you are actually justifying that had the Muslims listened to them, they would not have died, and they would have been in a situation in which they could have redeemed themselves. But the Almighty is telling them that look what you are actually what you are building up for your own self. You think that you're evading death. In the first case, you will never be able to do that. And in the second place, this is not an ordinary death. This is like martyrdom. And this is something that you should desire. And instead of justifying it, you have gone way ahead of that, and you think that death is something that could have been avoided. So this is not death that is to be avoided. This is something which should be the wish of every Muslim, and is in fact the wish of every Muslim. So the Quran says, وَلَئِن قُتِلْتُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَوْ مُتُّمْ لَمَغْفِرَةٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَحْمَةٌ خَيْرٌ مِّمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ. Now you should know that if you are killed for the cause of God, in قُتِلْتُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَوْ مُتُّمْ, or you die, then the forgiveness that you earn as a result, and the rahmah or mercy that you gather, is something that is far better. What is being told is that the mercy and forgiveness is far better than what they are amassing in the form of riches or in the form of things that they think they are doing. And wala in muttum aw qutiltum, so whether you die or whether you are killed for the cause of God, in any case you shall be gathered before the Almighty. So once again, the stress is that justifying death is another thing, and not understanding that this death is not an ordinary death. It's going to take you closer to God. It will earn you God's mercy. It will earn you His forgiveness, and it will be much better than what they are amassing. So again, the Quran is trying to, this comment, if you see, is an indirect means of motivation for the bogged down Muslims who thought that they had lost, who thought that defeat was now their destiny, and who actually were being overcome by this propaganda that, well, if the Prophet was really a true prophet, why did he get defeated in this line? He should not have been defeated in this battle. So all these things, remember, they were part of human psyche. And one thing that I'm sure you must be noting down as you go through this comment, it's a very detailed comment, how the Quran tackles the psychology of every individual. So you see, individuals are human beings. They have emotions. They have their own psyche. Defeat does affect everyone. Victory has its own effect. So, this was a very perfect propaganda that was launched by the hypocrites that, well, if he was a true prophet, victory would have been his destiny. We see, on the other hand, that this was not the case. So they are being told, and the Quran is actually telling them from various angles, that this is because of your own misplanning and your own disobedience to the Prophet's directive that this happened. And one of the reasons that this happened was also that God wanted to expose these elements amongst your own ranks. And also He wanted to expose you that some of you did not have that wish to die for the cause of God. And this should have been your greatest wish, because this is something that's going to earn you God's mercy and forgiveness. فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَظًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُتَوَكِّلِينَ إن ينصركم الله فلا غالب لكم وإن يخذلكم فمن ذا الذي ينصركم من بعده وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون. These are so powerful and so, verses have been steeped in such beautiful language that they really cause goosebumps on your skin if you are able to directly understand how the Quran is addressing the Prophet. It's such a moving instance in which the Quran is actually now addressing the Prophet in a very, very, in a very grand way, I would say. So it is because of God's favor that you are very gentle to them, O Prophet. Had you been ill-tempered and hard-hearted, all these would have dispersed from your presence. Therefore ignore them and seek forgiveness for them and keep consulting them in affairs. Then, when you have taken a decision, put your trust in God, because God loves only those who trust Him. Now, it is here that I'd like to focus and call your attention that, these verses of the Quran, they depict a very outstanding trait of the Prophet, and that is his gentleness, his politeness, his nobility, his trait of forgiving other people and even forgiving people who should not be forgiven. So at another instance, in the Battle of Tabuk, when the Almighty wanted to expose these hypocrites, and the Prophet actually, accepted their excuse of not going. They came up with this excuse that they don't have enough conveyance and their own camels, and they wanted to stay back. And the Prophet actually, allowed them. And on such an occasion, this is in Surah Tawbah, when the Almighty very lovingly says, Afallahu anka lima zinta lahum. God be merciful to you. Why did you give them permission to stay back? So the Prophet, if you look at his life, he was such a gentle, polite human being that he would accept these lame excuses also, as was the case of Tabuk. And here in this Battle of Uhud also, you can see that the Quran has once again made this point, that the Quran was so polite, the Prophet was so polite and gentle to people around him. The Quran says that had you been stern, had you been terse, had you been very, very rude to them, you would not have found these people around you. It is only because of your politeness, it is only because of your gentle temperament that they have gathered around you. So even now that they have made this horrible mistake, fa'fu anhum wastaghfir lahum washawirhum fil amr, even now God says, I would like to give them some more opportunity to think if they can mend their ways, if these hypocrites can then mend their ways. So what should you do? Farfu anhum, forgive them for this heinous crime that they have committed. Not only forgive them, the Quran says, wastaghfir lahum, ask for their forgiveness from me, God says. And washawirhum fil amr, and still consult them in affairs. Don't let them out. Don't keep them out, because this might make them lose whatever, small semblance of maturity they might have to change. This would make them go past that. So even if they have committed this huge blunder, forgive them, ask for their forgiveness, and keep consulting them. But however, you're not bound by their consultation. فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُتَوَكِّلِينَ. إن ينصركم الله فلا غالب لكم وإن يخذلكم فمن ذا الذي ينصركم من بعده وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون. Believers, if God is there to help you, none can overcome you. And if He abandons you, who then can help you after this? And believers should only trust in God. Again, you can clearly see that God is trying to inspire and motivate Muslims. And they are being told that you do not have to depend on these material sources all the time. Your own faith in God, your own trust in God, the way you hold God in proximity, that is something that's going to give you that boost. And the Quran says, if God is going to help you, then no one is going to overcome you in any way. But you have to earn God's help. He's not going to help you if you're cowards. He's going to help you if you stay in your battle post. He's going to help you if you fight the war the way it is fought and not show your backs. Because this is an attitude that's going to earn God's help. And once you earn God's help, فَلَا غَالِبَ لَكُمْ, none is going to prevail upon you. And فَإِن يَخْذُلْكُمْ فَمَنْ ذَا الَّذِي يَنْصُرُكُمْ بِبَعْدِهِ. But if on the other hand, God decides to abandon you for your misconduct, then فَمَنْ ذَا الَّذِي يَنْصُرُكُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِهِ, then there is no one except Him who can really help you. So therefore, what should be done? وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. On believers should only trust God. They should trust His messenger. They should trust His words. And in any way, not in any way, and in not so many words, the Almighty has said that this is their basic weakness. Their attachment to their goal, their attachment to Prophet and to God has left a lot to be desired. And this is something that they must really, really revisit. So the real thing is trusting God. It is an essential requirement of faith. And for a true believer, means and resources are always secondary. The primary weapon, the primary ammunition is that trust and faith in God. وَمَا كَانَ لِنَبِيٍّ أَن يَغُلَّ فَمَن يَغْلُلْ يَأْتِ بِمَا غَلَّ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ ثُمَّ تُوَفَّى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. They think that by going out of the city for this battle, the Prophet ill-wished for them. Certainly not. It is not in accordance with the stature of any prophet to be an ill-wisher. And they should know that whoever wishes ill shall be brought on the day of judgment with his ill wish. Then shall every person be fully paid what he earned, and none shall be shown injustice. So again, that comment is still continuing. You see, it was so important for the Almighty to make the Muslims realize their mistake, because now they were in the form of an organized body, and they had to gel together. They had to listen to the Prophet. They had to trust God. And so therefore, once again, they are being told that if you think that it was because of Prophet Muhammad's wrong planning of taking you out of the city to fight the war that resulted in their defeat, this is wrong. This is not what was in any way the Prophet's fault. It was basically your own fault. If he had gone out, it was because of a war strategy. And that strategy was something that was bound to bear fruit if people had been told what to do and they had followed that. So the Quran says that no prophet of God is such a person that he is going to be an ill-wisher of them. He, in accordance with his stature, a prophet can never be an ill-wisher. And whoever wishes ill shall be brought on the day of judgment with his ill wish. In other words, the Almighty says that anyone who's going to be an ill wisher, then he is not going to be spared on the day of judgment, even if he's a prophet of God. But of course, they do not in any way wish ill for their people. They would like their people to prosper. They would like their people to succeed. But then the people have to also realize what this whole thing is all about. So, أَفَمَنِ اتَّبَعَ رِضْوَانَ اللَّهِ كَمَنْ بَاءَ بِسَخَطٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَمَأْوَاهُ جَهَنَّمُ وَبِئْسَ الْمَصِيرُ. So, can he who seeks to please God become like those who incurred his wrath, and hell is whose abode, and what an evil abode it is? Hum darajatun indallah wallahu basirum bima ya'malun. Different will be their status with God, and God is watching over whatever they are doing. So again, this is that comment continuing, that how can he who seeks to please God become like those who incurred his wrath, and hell is whose abode? Such people cannot be alike. It can never happen. The two are absolutely distinct. And for the latter, the Almighty says that وَبِئْسَ الْمَصِيرُ, and Wahu Jahannam, right before that, they will have the evil abode of hell that they will encounter, and this is the most unworthy thing that they can ever face. And they should not forget that everyone will have different ranks and status before God. Wallahu basirun bima ya'malun, because God is watching over them. If He is giving them different ranks and status, it is because they earn this. It's not that it is God who has destined their fate for them. No, they are earning their fate for themselves. And then again, you see, if you look at the Quranic beauty, the way it inspires and motivates the weak Muslims and the hypocrites also to come back to God, once again you see the forceful element and the beauty of the Quranic rhyme is there. لَقَدْ مَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذْ بَعَثَ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِّنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَإِنْ كَانُوا مِنْ قَبْلُ لَفِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. In reality, God has been very gracious to the believers in sending them a messenger from amongst themselves who recites out his revelations before them and purifies them, and for this instructs them in law and in wisdom. And there is no doubt that before this they were in open error. So once again, God is trying to remind them of their great favor, that in the form of Prophet Muhammad, they are being blessed with the Prophet after centuries. Remember, the Prophet that came before Prophet Muhammad amongst the Ishmaelites was the Prophet Ishmael, the eldest son of Prophet Abraham, and that was 2,000 years before Christ. 2,000 years before Christ, and 2,500 years before Prophet Muhammad himself. So for 2.5, it's like 25 centuries almost, no prophet had come among them. So the Almighty is telling them that look at God's favor, that you were in dire state. You were fighting with one another. You had gone astray, and now this prophet has come to you. And what is he doing? He is instructing them, or instructing you in law and in wisdom. Al-Hikmah and Al-Kitab. These are the two contents of religion. We have discussed them earlier on as well. And the purpose of this instruction is that he is able to purify them. So the word used by the Quran is tazkiyah. Yuzakkihim. And it means both to cleanse something of filth and to develop and nurture it. So the law and wisdom with which prophets of God instruct mankind achieve both these objectives. What they do is they cleanse the individual and collective lives of the Muslims, and they also nurture and develop them in the right directions. So yuzakkihim wa yu'allimuhul kitab, the word al-kitab and al-hikmah, actually, as we have already discussed, al-kitab refers to the divine laws, and al-hikmah refers to the issues of faith and morality. So this is the great favor that the Almighty bestowed upon the Quraysh, and they must look at this with immense gratitude towards the Almighty. But instead of doing that, they have adopted a very opposite attitude. أَوَلَمَّا أَصَابَتْكُم مُّصِيبَةٌ قَدْ أَصَبْتُم مِّثْلَيْهَا قُلْتُمْ أَنَّىٰ هَٰذَا قُلْ هُوَ مِنْ عِندِ أَنفُسِكُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَىٰ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ وَمَا أَصَابَكُمْ يَوْمَ الْتَقَى الْجَمْعَانِ فَبِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ وَلِيَعْلَمَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And yes, when a calamity struck you after you yourselves had early inflicted them with losses twice as heavy, did you also say, where has this come from? Tell them, O Prophet, it was because of you your own selves, of you yourself that it came. If God grants victory, He also inflicts defeat as per His wisdom, because God has power over all things. And moreover, the disaster which befell you when the two armies met was ordained by God and befell so that He may see who the true believers are. So again, we see this extended comment of the Almighty, extended comment. I mean, it is continuing throughout these verses on the reversal, on the defeat which the Muslims suffered in the battle of Uhud. And it's said here that it's not God's fault. It's not that he is going to has any blame on his own self in any way. The Quran says, "Kul huwa min indi anfusikum." It is because of their own folly. It is because of their own mistake. And if you want to know the real reason why God inflicted this defeat, then you must know that وَلِيَعْلَمَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, God wanted to test and to sift out true believers, because out of this huge test will pass only those people who are true believers. So one of the reasons for the Battle of Uhud was to make this sort of a standard in which the people who were true in faith, people who were true followers of the Prophet, they would become distinct because of their attitude, and others would not. And then the Quran says, وَلِيَعْلَمَ الَّذِينَ نَافَقُوا وَقِيلَ لَهُمْ تَعَالَوْا قَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَوِ ادْفَعُوا قَالُوا لَوْ نَعْلَمُ قِتَالًا لَاتَّبَعْنَاكُمْ هُمْ لِلْكُفْرِ يَوْمَئِذٍ أَقْرَبُ مِنْهُمْ لِلْإِيمَانِ. And those also who had adopted hypocrisy from the very beginning, the ones that when they were told, "Come, fight for the cause of God, or at least defend your city," they had replied, "If we knew that a battle was going to take place, we would have surely come with you." So that is the Quran making this comment. And then it says, يَقُولُونَ بِأَفْوَاهِهِمْ مَا لَيْسَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا يَكْتُمُونَ. On that day, they were closer to disbelief than belief. They were uttering words from their mouths which were not in their hearts, and God fully knew what they were concealing. الَّذِينَ قَالُوا لِإِخْوَانِهِمْ وَقَعَدُوا لَوْ أَطَاعُونَا مَا قُتِلُوا قُلْ فَادْرَءُوا عَنْ أَنفُسِكُمُ الْمَوْتَ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. The ones who kept sitting and said of their brothers who had gone out to fight, "Had they listened to us, they would not have been slain in this manner." Tell them, ward off your death then, if you say is true, if what you say is true. So again, this is the aspect which the Quran has made it has not minced words to express that basically this whole battle was fought by Muslims, and they had amongst them in their ranks people who were hypocrites, people who were weak in faith, and these weak in faith Muslims and these hypocrites did not want the Prophet to go out of Medina and fight, so they stayed back. Many of them did not even go, and others who went, they regretted and said that had they not gone, they would not have suffered this defeat. And the Quran is saying that this is not going to happen. And if you think that you can ward off your martyrdom, or you could have warded off your death in the battle, then why don't you try warding off your death even in a normal situation? So because death is not something that you can defy, whatever the circumstances, whether it's peace or war, it's going to come anyway. So by telling your fellow Muslims that had they not gone out and stayed in the city, they would have remained secure, this is an absolutely wrong thing. And obviously you can also see, dear viewers, that primarily this answer and these motivating lines are primarily directed towards the believers, so that they are told that if they suffered this reversal, it was not because of a wrong strategy, it was not because they had gone out and fought, it was because of certain other reasons. And they must also now be very, very clear in their minds that these hypocrites are in their ranks. They are now going to cause this nuisance. They are now going to have that final battle fought between belief and disbelief, and they are now going to, really try very hard. And it is in these circumstances, dear viewers, as we shall see inshallah in the later surahs of the Quran, that when the disbelievers, they saw that these battles were not harming the Muslims in any way, in fact they were getting stronger and stronger, that they started with another strategy. And we'll discuss that in detail in Surah Ahzab and some of the other surahs also, when they started to scandalize the private life of the Prophet. And they would raise this scandal that how can a prophet be a prophet of God whose wife Aisha radiallahu anha, we know about her, that there was a scandal that was raised by these scandal mongers, and they would say that she had committed adultery, and there was a whole scene that was being created. So they then, in their later part of their struggle, they took to another subversive activity, and when they saw that battles and wars are not going to win them the situation, they resorted to these evil measures of scandalizing the life of the Prophet, and even scandalizing him right here by telling the Muslims that what kind of a prophet are you following? because he has suffered defeat. And had he been a true prophet, this would not have happened. So remember, this is how they were working. And it is so important to realize the existence of these hypocrites, because you see, Muslims had ties when they had migrated from Mecca to Medina. They had ties with the mushrikun, and these ties were something that they wanted to keep intact for a number of reasons. And the Quran was repeatedly telling them that they have these people in their ranks who are like snakes in their own ranks. They are just going to bite them when the time comes, and they have to remain aware of them. So I'm going to stop here with verse 168. Inshallah, next week we'll be doing the idiomatic and literal translation of this part. Before we go on, this comment is still continuing, and as we shall see from later verses, that the Almighty has made it a point to really take advantage of this situation and give a number of other directives to the Muslims, which of course in time they did receive. So now if you have any questions regarding what we have just studied, please raise them.
Shazia, please unmute your mic and ask your question. Thank you.
Ji, thank you. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab. I have a question about the verse 157, 158. So in 158, Allah Ta'ala says, وَلَئِن مُتُّمْ أَوْ قُتِلْتُمْ لَإِلَى اللَّهِ تُحْشَرُونَ, which is, I think, general. So this is for everyone. If anyone dies, everyone will go towards Allah. But in 157, when he says, وَلَئِن قُتِلْتُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَوْ مُتُّمْ, is this specific to fi sabilillahi, the muttum, like when you die?
No, actually, in both cases there is a purpose. The first purpose, or in the first verse, the purpose is to tell the believers that whether you die or whether you are slain in the cause of God, you will earn the forgiveness and mercy of God. This is one purpose. And then the second purpose is that whether you die or whether you are slain, you're not going to just disappear in this earth, you are going to be gathered before Him. So this is like telling people that in the first instance, that these are acts, if you die for the cause of God, if you are killed for the cause of God, then this is a far better fate than you might think. And the second is that this is not going to end you. This is not like life's end. This is something that is going to take you in the presence of God. So both these verses have been repeated for, these two objectives.
No, I was just thinking, can we not generalize it for ourselves, that whatever we are gathering is like the maghfirat from Allah and the rahmah is better than what we are gathering, so we cannot take the first verse for us, because aw muttum, how do you die in fi sabilillah? You can be killed in this fi sabilillah. How do you die fi sabilillah? Isn't that verse for us?
No, see, the Qutila part and the Muttum part can be understood easily, that because people even die in battles also. They die natural deaths. This is something that has occurred in so many battles, and it's not always the battlefield exactly. You see, there's a preparation part in which you're going for the battle, you're stationed there for some time. So people die because of injuries also, people die for other reasons also. So basically it's not that, the Qutiltum part is being stressed. It is just being said that if you die for the cause of God, whether it's a natural death or whether it's something that has come upon you because of an enemy attack, in both cases, because you have now committed yourself for the cause of God, you will earn that mercy. So this is a very specific context, and this speaks of the war. For us, obviously, the fact that people today can even die for the cause of God and they can be killed for the cause of God, it would be also something very rewarding. But for them, for the companions, this had a very special message. For example, for them it was that forgiveness was destined for them if they would die for the cause of God, because of course they would be laying down their lives for this purpose. So it has this particular stress for the companions of the Prophet. For us, we can extrapolate and we can say this much, that of course it's going to be equally very rewarding for us, and we will also be something. We'll also earn the God's forgiveness. But as I said, this is of the nature of an extrapolation or analogy, and that too in a way that we must understand that there will be this slight difference, that for them this is something that was destined for them because they were part of this whole campaign as the companions of God's messengers. Whereas for us, of course, it's like a secondary contribution that we would be doing. I'm not lessening it in any way, but just trying to make this point that these verses are very specifically related to the situation that had arisen in the Battle of Uhud.
Because if we take out the battles, Surah Baqarah, Al-Imran, most of them are about the battles. If we take out a lot of these verses, which are very specific to the battle, then there's very little left for us to reflect on. Like in this day and age, we know the history from the Quran, but how do we apply it in our daily
So, you
lives if we
see, I
don't
mean,
take them in our context?
you see, for us, as I just said, we extrapolate, and by analogy, if there is a battle today against persecution, and as Muslims we are called upon to fight, and we lay down our lives, we will be called martyrs for the cause of God. So martyrdom is something that still can happen if it is for the right objective and for the right cause. So in the time of the Prophet, remember, there were two types of battles. One was against disbelief as a punishment for such disbelievers. This is no longer going to happen today. I mean, we are no longer warranted to make it happen. The second was against persecution and injustice. That also happened in the time of the Prophet, and today also it can happen. So war against injustice, war against persecution, if we take part in that war and we are martyred for that in any way, will of course earn us the same thing. So we can see that the analogy is going to still work. But as you can see, that this again is an analogy, it's an extrapolation, it's something that you can draw an inference from. The Quran, in the context that we are studying it here, is speaking about the Battle of Uhud. But it does not specify that if only we fight for the battles that the Prophet fought, would we earn martyrdom. Of course, this is there for us as well. But then it has to be for the right cause. Today we cannot fight for the cause of punishing people, as was the case in the times of the Prophet. Today, the only rightful cause or justifiable cause for qital or jihad is persecution or against persecution or injustice. So if we earn martyrdom in such a battle, obviously we will be given the same reward. I mean, if not exactly the same, pretty close to it.
Thank you so
But
much
we
for that,
have no
Dr.
war,
Saleem.
so there is
Shazia,
no
I'm going to come back to you.
So one thing that I would like to tell you is that even if we don't have wars, if you have this commitment in your own mind that if the chance arises that I am called to lay down my life, then I'll not withhold myself. Even that desire in you is going to earn you a lot of reward. If that doesn't happen, of course, I mean, that is something like a culmination of that desire. But other than that, that desire also is something that must be relished and cherished. And I wish that we could nurture this desire in our own selves and also in our children.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Amar Rasool, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Doctor, from these verses that you mentioned, there was a part where the Quran speaks about the gentle nature of the Prophet and how Doctor, as a generic article of faith, can it be believed that the Prophet, who was after all a creation of God, is actually more gentle-hearted and more loving than the Almighty Himself? Is that possible to believe? Should we believe that?
I don't think so. We should not believe that, because I mean, God is the quintessence of all attributes, and I mean, we know from the Bible, from one place the Bible says God created man in His own image, which means that the attributes which God has, like mercy and forgiveness and justice, every human being also has those attributes, but they are like small reflection of those attributes which God has. And prophets of God are they stand at the pinnacle of humanity, so they are extremely gentle, much more gentle than common human beings. They have, as the Quran has said about the Prophet himself, "Innaka la'ala khuluqin azim," that you stand at the pinnacle of morality. So that is what we can say, that in the human plane, prophets of God, they stand at the zenith and pinnacle. But there is no comparison with the Prophet and God Himself. I mean, God is the quintessence, the ultimate expression of all these attributes.
So then, Dr. Saab, how come the Quran says that Allah Ta'ala had planned on punishing these people, but then Hazur Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, through his gentle nature, spoiled that plan of God to punish these people? In this particular
where is this mentioned in the Quran?
Dr. Saab, I am not the scholar you are, but
I don't think it's not mentioned anywhere.
Ghamidi Saab has mentioned it quite often, that in the Quran God says that what have you done? You have spoiled my plan.
That's an entirely different. No. That is in Surah Tawbah. It has a very different context. And I just cited that verse. It says, Afallahu anka lima azinta lahum. So it is in the Battle of Tabuk is being discussed. And here the Almighty wanted the hypocrites to be exposed for their misdemeanor. And the Prophet, out of his own gentleness, spoiled the Almighty's plans, so to speak. And out of his own politeness, he forgave them. So basically, what is being said here is that the Prophet still thought that there is some semblance of sanity left in them, and he wanted to give them that chance. But the Almighty knows what is in the hearts. So remember, there is this big difference. People like me and you, we don't know what's going on in the hearts of people. God says, I knew who they are from inside, so I would not have forgiven them.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Dr. Saleem, I have a chat question. For the Battle of Uhud, Allah forgave the Sahaba who ran away. What was Allah's ruling on the Battle of Hunain when Sahaba ran away from the battlefield?
So remember, it was not the Sahaba who ran. The true Sahaba, they never ran away. And also, you must understand that these were weak Muslims. I just explained that at times hypocrisy borders with weakness in faith. If you are a weak person in faith, then there is a very thin line between hypocrisy and weakness in faith. So these were the people who ran away. And remember, the Quran is not speaking of the real Sahaba. It says that minkum man yuridu dunya wa minkum man yuridu al-akhirah. There were those amongst you who desired this world, which actually shows that amongst these Muslims, there were hypocrites who were present. And they were sort of in a dilly-dallying situation. They were neither here nor there, as the Quran has said elsewhere, muzabzabina bayna zalik. And they had just entered into the Muslim ranks because they thought that perhaps ultimately the Muslims are going to be winners and we will side by them. But if they are not winners, then we'll just go back to our original ranks. So they were just opportunists, as we can say. So basically, these were the opportunists who Muslims found in their own ranks, and some of these opportunists also were able to have an impact on other Muslims. So this is the section of people that is being talked about. And it does seem that they were in some substantial number for them to this comment of the Quran to be warranted. So we have to understand we're not talking about the Sahaba at all. These were weak Muslims bordering on hypocrisy.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Shabana Ansari, please unmute your mic and ask your question. Shabana, are you there? Okay, we'll go to the next question and come back to Shabana. Dr. Asif, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
This is regarding verse 155, where it says, "Inna lazina tawallaw minkum yawmal taqal jama'an, innama tazallahum ash-shaytan bi ba'zi ma kasabu."
Yes.
So these were their past misdeeds or mismaneuvers that resulted in this behavior that was encountered during this Qatl Uhud. So how do you specify this ma kasabu? What were those mismaneuvers and misdeeds that resulted in such behavior in the current situation?
If you look at the Quran, Inna ladhin tawallaw minkum yawmal taqal jama'an, innama stazallahum ash-shaytanu bima kasabu. This that greed for the war booty was something that they already had in their hearts in a seed form, like a rudimentary form, and Satan played upon that, and it made them show that now is the opportunity to grab that war booty, and so they succumbed at his suggestion. So basically, it was that weakness that was already found in them. They thought that this is the time to grab that war booty, and Satan said, okay, now the time, otherwise if you don't go and leave your posts, then the war booty or the war spoils are going to be taken up by the rest of the army. So it is referring to that attitude that they already had, which the Quran has said, minkum man yuridu dunya, that you were after the pleasures of this world. And when you are after these pleasures, then Satan lures you to opportunities which are in consonance with this desire. So he showed you that now is the time to fulfill that desire that you have to gather some riches of the world.
Thank you for that, Dr. Saleem. We have Abdul Rahman.
Yes, thank you. Sir, my question is a follow-up with my previous question just a few moments back. You said that sometimes weak faith borders with the hypocrisy, right? So what can be done? I mean, my question is coming from a perspective of self-reflection or self-correction. What can be done to move away from that border so that our faith doesn't fall in that category of weak faith?
Precisely what the Quran has just described, to show trust in God. You see, the thing that makes us weak in faith is that we lose this trust in God. When we see that something has happened against our expectations, we have all sorts of justifications. We think that, well, maybe we were not planning enough, maybe we were short in our strategy, maybe something has happened and we need to go and consult some faith healer. So you see, it's basically that weakness in which we don't trust God, we draw away from Him, and we start trusting other superstitious beliefs, I would say, and which actually cause us to go further away from God. So if you have to do away with hypocrisy, if you have to do away with hypocrisy which is bordering with weak faith, then the opposite of that is to come closer and closer to God, to trust Him, to consign all matters with Him. And this does not mean that to do nothing. It means that you do your own part. So you see, the Almighty also says that only those du'as are accepted and only those deeds are have weight before His eyes which are done first by the person himself or herself in the required and stipulated and optimum way. I mean, if you are not going to do your part, God is not interested in doing His part, because He's going to supplement your part. And for this, you have to trust Him, you have to draw closer to Him, you have to be grateful to Him, you have to seek His forgiveness, you have to repent whenever you make a mistake, you have to own up to your mistakes, you have to come closer to His creatures, you have to show your own sympathy and your own kindness. So all those things in which you are able to draw closer to God and to His creatures, they are a means of building up your faith. And to come closer to God, of course, is one of the greatest ways is to have a good understanding of the Quran, to try to have a living relationship with the Quran by constantly going through the Quran every day, by understanding it, by trying to implement it. And then, of course, the night prayer, which is the tahajjud prayer, has a very, very important significance in bringing us closer to God. It is a prayer in which we are very close to God, like in that night time, in the solitude of night, when we are all alone by ourselves, we are talking to Him, we have broken our sleep, which is something very difficult in the middle of the night when you get up. This is something which is very dear to God also. So by praying to Him in the tahajjud prayer and pouring our heart out before Him, so this is how we are able to come closer to God and not succumb to the lures of Satan.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Saleem. Shabana, if you can unmute your mic.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम डॉक्टर साहब एक फी सबीलिल्लाह जान और माल का नुकसान होता है और एक आम तौर पे जिंदगी में जो इस तरह सुना जाता है कि जैसे लोग कहते हैं कि काश ये ना किया होता तो ये जानी नुकसान ना होता या काश ऐसे ना किया होता तो वो माली नुकसान तो इसके बारे में क्या गुंजाइश है मतलब ये कहना चाहिए नहीं कहना चाहिए इसके बारे में रहनुमाई फरमाइए
It depends on the nature of things. You see, at times you realize that you made a wrong assessment of things. So this is one thing. At times you might have been overconfident. At times you might have adopted a wrong strategy. So it's a case of re-evaluating whatever you did. But for example, if you come to the conclusion that all these elements were absolutely perfect, there was no flaw in the strategy, the time was right, I did not overestimate, I was not overconfident, then of course these are factors that you have to understand, that in spite of everything being perfect, at times God does not allow it to happen for His own certain reasons, and there are a number of expedient reasons, which means that there are a number of benefits that might appear for your own self later on. So in that case you have to trust God. So I mean, it's not a generic case in which you think that, well, this was destined and so therefore we must accept God's will. We have to understand that God's will is something that we will only know once things have happened. I mean, we just cannot know about God's will in advance. So this is a comment that we normally make on our past mistake. And at times that mistake is not a mistake, and it's like something that we did in a perfect way, and God did not allow it to happen. So in such a case we say that, well, it was God's will. I mean, when we reflect back. But at times that is not God's will. At times it is our own bad planning. At times it is our own bad strategy. At times it is our own wrong assessment. So we cannot attribute that to God and say that, well, this was God's will. Once we are confident that we did everything right, but still things did not happen our way, it is here that we submit to God's will and say, well, if things did not happen in spite of all the ingredients being correct, then there must have been some good reason for God not making it happen, and we must trust Him. This is the true concept of trust.
जी डेथ्स के बारे में ज्यादातर इस तरह का होता है ना कि लोग कहते हैं इधर ना हम निकलते उस तरफ तो वो ट्रैफिक में ये हादसा ना होता या ना होता, इस तरह की बात, मतलब डेथ्स पे खास तौर पे जरा इस चीज पर वो
I mean, you see, this is all something that we say once the death has happened. I mean, we don't know that the thing that was going to happen was destined in this way. I mean, God knew that I am going to take this route today and I am going to meet with an accident and pass away. So this is only God's knowledge. Other than that, what we know is that we were supposed to take this decision, and this decision resulted in our death. Had we not taken this decision, of course, we can say that in hindsight. I mean, we could have said that this in the same way when we attempt a paper, and for example, a multiple choice question comes up, and let's say we take the wrong option, and immediately later on, once we come out of the exam center, we realize that, well, I made this mistake. So, I mean, we just cannot make that happen or attribute it to God, because now you have realized that it was your choice and you actually took that wrong choice. Similarly, if that accident happened, it was not that God had destined it to happen. It is because you took that turn. For example, if you had not taken that turn, that might not have happened, and some other way would have, maybe your death would have come in some other way. But now God knew that this is how things are going to shape up. So basically, this is just the foreknowledge of God that we are accepting. Otherwise, what has happened because of the fact that we use our own free will, and I mean, that did not succeed. So these are two separate things. We must keep them separate.
Okay,
Thank you for that, Shabana. I have to stop here because we're almost out of time, and I have one more question. Dr. Saleem, I have a question in the chat. Do you want me to ask you or hold it for later?
Okay, please go ahead.
We're almost
Go
out of
ahead.
time. Okay. The last sermon of the Prophet has reached us in 3 different versions, where he leaves behind the Quran and the Sunnah, or the Quran and the Ahl Bayt. Which one is the most authentic and why?
All of them are correct. I mean, all of them have their own importance. The Ahl Bayt, or referring to the wives of the Prophet, they had a very special status. They were the mothers of the faithful, remember, and they were given special directives. So the Quran is actually reminding, the Prophet is reminding the Muslim that, remember, these are like your mothers, and you have to treat them as your mothers. And he might pass away, and he did. And if they are going to outlive him, then don't forget that they have this special status. So remember, the Ahl Bayt are not referring to anyone else except the wives of the Prophet. So it's like the Prophet cautioning them and prodding them that, yes, I'm leaving behind the Quran, which is a source of guidance, and I'm leaving behind my wives. And now they are like your mothers, and you have to protect them.
But then, Dr. Saleem, how do the Shia brethren refer to...
So they actually extend the Ahlul Bayt to the children, and to Fatima and to Ali and to Hassan and to Hussein. So that is an extension which is unwarranted if you look at the Arabic language.
Okay. Ahmed Rahman, very short question. I'm out of time. So if you want to make it quick, or you want to keep it for next time.
Yeah, sure. My question was that Allah still...
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead, please. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Allah still forgave them, right? And the same incident was repeated in the Battle of Hunain. So what were the comments of Allah on that incident?
I'm sorry, I didn't get your question, because one part of the question was, I think there was some connection issue.
Can you repeat your question?
Yeah.
Rahman sir?
Yeah, sure. So I was saying that were they weaker Muslims or hypocrites? In the Battle of Uhud, they ran away and Allah forgave them. And the same incident was repeated in the Battle of Hunain. So what were the comments of Allah on that incident?
So in the Battle of Hunain also, the Almighty actually said that when they were large in number, and the Quran has said that you were proud and you showed vanity on your large numbers, and you still did not show, the resilience and the bravery that was required of you. And of course, that comment also, if you go in detail, we'll study that in Surah Tawbah, and you'll see that how in the Battle of Hunain the Quran is commented in detail. I don't have the verses right in front of me, and it might take a little more time to comment, because there is a whole paragraph in Surah Tawbah which deals with the Battle of Hunain and how the Muslims are commented upon that. And it was the reverse at that time. In the Battle of Uhud and Badr, they were very few in number, but in the Battle of Hunain, they were actually outnumbering their enemy. So they were taken to a task, and they were actually reprimanded for this as well. So we'll do that inshallah in detail once we come to Surah Tawbah as well.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Saleem. It was a fantastic session.